when we think about the fall in the Garden of Eden, we read in the Bible in Genesis that God placed curses on both the man and the woman. And we're familiar with them in general, like the man's going to now have to toil hard for the rest of his life. We learned that the woman's going to have pain in childbirth. Thank you very much for that, Eve. But one of the curses that we sometimes forget about is this curse that we can read about in Genesis 3:16 that's a little bit mystifying. It simply says, God says in Genesis 3:16 that the woman will have a desire for her husband. The woman will desire her husband, and he will rule over her. Now, we could just gloss right by that and think, oh, okay, whatever that means. I don't know. But I believe God gave me a bit of an insight on this particular curse a while back. And the insight is this. If you remember back to when you were 4, 5, 6 years old, let alone a teenage girl, do you recall having almost this overwhelming, maybe even neurotic desire to grab yourself a guy, to get a man's attention, to secure a man, to reel him in? It's true for almost all women. This overwhelming, compulsive, neurotic desire to get yourself a man. And even as a married woman, sometimes we are paralyzed with fear when we should be setting boundaries with our husband. If he's really acting immorally or something, we can be paralyzed with fear because of this neurotic desire that I believe is part of that curse, that we must hang on to this man no matter what. And if we were to draw boundaries and impose consequences on really wrong behavior, that maybe he'll leave us and, oh no, then what will I do because I've got to hang on to my man? This neurotic desire, right? And I think it could be traced back to this curse from Genesis 3:16, where God says, your desire will be for your husband. He says that's a curse. Ugh. So what's a woman to do? Well, I believe we ask God to break that hold in our lives. You know, Jesus came to rescue us and redeem us. So I believe that we can ask God to help us to have opened eyes to the way that we've been acting neurotically, viewing men in a neurotic way as a result of that curse. Ask God, am I remaining, latched on to this guy, this boyfriend perhaps, if you're not married yet? Am I remaining latched on to this guy in a neurotic way that is not healthy for me? Lord, help me to see from your perspective if I need to let go of this particular boyfriend. And if you're married, ask God, am I operating from a place of fear, like this neurotic fear that I've got to hold on to this husband no matter what, and I can't set any boundaries because what if he leaves me then, and then what will I do because I have to have this man? And ask God to show you if you're operating from a place of fear that's part of that curse, and ask God to give you courage to do what God is asking you to do in the relationship, which may be boldly, courageously setting some boundaries and imposing consequences if need be. And I'm not saying you should divorce your husband or anything like that, but sometimes we remain paralyzed because of fear and we don't set correct boundaries if our husband is operating way outside the lines and perhaps abusing us or sleeping around with other women or whatever. Ask God to give you his perspective and courage to do what the Lord would have you do in your marriage. And let's discontinue operating under that curse.